All right, let's get into how to cook our steak. We talked about the things that you need to look for, that marbling, that nice good fat that's in there. Next, let's talk about how we want to prepare our steak. Now, first things first is anytime we have any cut of meat, it doesn't matter what it is, but especially steak, you want to make sure you bring it up to room temperature. Never cook your steak directly from the refrigerator or the freezer because it's not going to cook evenly, okay? The next thing we need to do is make sure that we get our pan nice and hot, okay? And once we get our pan nice and hot, we will be able to sear our steak perfectly. This getting the pan nice and hot is on a nice medium heat, okay? We don't want to have it on a super high heat. We want to have it on a nice medium heat, so that way when the pan heats up, it heats up evenly. Never heat up your pan on high heat. It's not good for the pan, and it's definitely not good for your steak. A good steak needs two things. Well, three things. Salt, pepper, and a whole lot of love, baby. And you want to generously put your salt on there. This is about an inch thick steak, so I want to make sure that my seasoning is good. I'm going to flip that over, and I'm going to season the other side. Now, once our steak is seasoned thoroughly with salt and pepper, you don't just throw it in the pan. You actually want to let that steak sit and have the salt do its job. Now, what is the job of the salt when searing a steak? The job of the salt when searing a steak is to create what is called a Maillard reaction within the steak. And a Maillard reaction within the steak is when the salt, which its job is to denature proteins, actually takes those protein strands and loosens those protein strands up. As it loosens those protein strands up, sugar is released from the steak. When that sugar is released from the steak and it gets into your hot pan, guess what happens? It caramelizes, it gets brown, it gets crusty. All of those things that make a good steak a great steak. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this out on my counter just like this, already seasoned with salt and pepper, and I season all sides, and I'm going to let it sit for around 30 minutes. All right, so it's been around 30 minutes. Let's get into the pan. All right, so once I have my pan heated up, and how I know my pan is going to be heated up, I'm going to heat it on medium heat, and this has been on medium since I actually seasoned my steak. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my hand, I'm going to put it over my pan, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, and I can feel that heat transfer to my palm. I know that my pan is nice and hot. What I'm going to do is here, I have some beef tallow. I'm going to add some oil into my pan, and I'm going to use a nice high heat oil, and this is a blended oil. And then I'm going to take some of my beef tallow, and I'm going to get that right into there. Okay, my beef tallow is melting nicely. Then I'm going to take my steak, and I'm going to lay it in the pan, and I'm going to press down on that steak. The reason I'm pressing down on the steak is because I want to get a nice even crust all over the steak. I will not touch this steak again for another 4 minutes. It has been 4 minutes, and I am going to flip my steak. Oh boy. Look at that. And then as you can see, nice crust on that steak. I'm going to put it down for another 4 minutes. What I'm going to do now is while that steak is cooking, I'm going to tilt my pan and I'm going to take some of that nice beef tallow and I am just going to do what we call arrosé, and that means to baste with fat. So my steak has seared nicely on both sides. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my steak, and the thing about steak is that you have to let it rest. Give it one last good basting. Then I'm going to take this and I am going to put it onto a rack, a pan with a rack, and I'm going to let that steak sit there for 3 minutes before I do anything to it. And there it is, your beautifully seared ribeye steak, green beans, and you know I love some sweet potatoes, so I made a little sweet potato puree. Enjoy!